master the business of speaking with your hosts, Taylor and Austin. You're listening to Technically Speaking.
Welcome to another episode of Technically Speaking. We're your hosts, Taylor and Austin, and today we are talking about kindness, what it actually is, how it's different than being nice, and how we can use it inside of our businesses to build better relationships and have a better impact. And the perfect person to talk on this subject is kindness expert Shola Richards. As a speaker, Shola has shared his transformative message of kindness and his go-together framework with universities, Silicon Valley, TEDx stages. And to this date, he says his greatest honor is being able to testify in front of the select committee on Capitol Hill about kindness and how to bring more civility to Congress. Last but certainly not least, Shola is a husband, father, identical twin, and self-professed kindness extremist who will not rest until bullying and incivility are extinct from the American workplace. So let's dive in. Let's learn about kindness. Let's learn about how it's different than being nice and how we can make the most of it. As always, stick around to the end for some awesome resources, and we hope you enjoy this one.
All right, and we are live. Shola, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, what's going on, Taylor? Hey, Austin. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys.
Man, it's our pleasure. So good to have you. It's really our treat. So
Yeah.
This is going to be a fun episode. You know, we find ourselves we try as best as we can to be a mission first organization, and you, I think, are maybe the best example I can think of somebody who lives that. So. Yep. Really excited to dive in. But before we get into the nitty gritty, I just have to point out that you're probably one of the best dressed human beings.
Oh, certainly, without a doubt.
Is this a natural thing that comes, or can you give me a number for somebody that I can talk to about this?
Yeah, you got a stylist, man?
Or? Oh my God. Oh, first of all, I mean, thank God this is being recorded because I'm going to just replay the first 45 seconds, minute of this before I start my talks. Honestly, my dad was one of those guys. It's you can always be overdressed, but never be underdressed. So it's that was something that just kind of stuck with me. And I never wanted my clothes to be a distraction in a bad way. God, what is he doing? What's he wearing? So I try my best to try to kind of look together. I mean, let's be real though. I mean, I'm on a podcast with two amazing gentlemen. I'm not gonna roll in here not prepared because you never know, man. I gotta represent for my guys. So that's the reason why. I mean, the second this is over, I'm peeling this off and throwing on my sweats and a t-shirt. But yeah, I appreciate the compliment, guys.
Oh, for sure. I appreciate a well-dressed man. I put on a vest and I look like I'm an Olive Garden waiter. And so I can't let myself go there. But anyway,
dude,
you're
bring
an inspiration.
Those breadsticks and we're good, man. That's all I need.
Sweet. All right. Another new side hustle. So look, I mean, we could start this conversation a bunch of different ways, but as usual, I mean, we go and do additional research on our guests before we start off. And there was this line that we saw on your website that I really think hit home for both Taylor and I. And that was this idea of using kindness as a business strategy, which I mean, at face value makes total sense, but I don't think that's talked about too often. So can you sort of just take us on a journey for a second here as to how this idea, among all of your other great ideas, sort of came to life?
It's first of all, thanks for taking the time to research that. I think kindness is so misunderstood. And I think that's the reason why some folks like kindness as a business strategy. Well, I think the problem is people equate kindness with being nice, right? So being nice by definition is just being polite and agreeable. Anyone can do that. Some of the worst human beings on earth have the capacity to say please and thank you. You know what I mean? Kindness is really, it's a matter of depth. And we're talking about demonstrating through your actions that you actually care about your fellow human beings. And so as a business strategy, what this means is that you are going to engage in challenging conversations with people who you work with because it's a demonstration of you caring about them, you will do it instead of letting it slide. Does that mean holding people accountable? This also means just being in a place where they can show up and remove the barriers for them to do their best work. Any business out there, whether you're an airline or you work in fast food or you're in healthcare or whatever, tech, you want to have people doing their best work and treating each other well so that they're not having these barriers in the way of showing up for their clients, their customers, and for each other.
So it's sort of about making an environment where people feel safe, maybe.
Mhm. Absolutely. Safe to be themselves and safe to also be able to share. Like, we're like, what, 20, 21 months into the pandemic. And I think
Yeah.
the mental health impact on people has been really well documented. But one of the issues, the biggest ones, that people still don't feel safe sharing with others the struggles that they're going through, right? That's where kindness comes in and psychological safety comes in. If I can raise my hand and tell my colleagues or my boss, hey, I'm burned out, or I need help, or I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, and know that you won't be shamed or embarrassed for doing so, that is the height of psychological safety and kindness. And every organization needs to have that as part of their culture. And to me, that's what I'm fighting for. I want to make sure people, before we get into all the deep stuff and the challenging stuff about metrics and numbers, and can we just be good humans? Can we just start there as the foundation and make sure that we're not hurting people through our words and actions? Once we have that as our baseline, we can go so much faster to the other steps of the pyramid to get to the top.
Wow. Yeah, man, that resonates so much with me. I'm curious, Shola, like what led you here? Like what led you to this position where now we're talking about kindness as a business strategy? Tell us the journey?
Yeah, man. It's so funny, Taylor, because I wish I had like a Disney curated story. I was like, yeah, man, it's just like I saw the beauty of kindness, and I was like, I want that in my life. It's such a dark story, but I think a lot of times people find positive things through darkness. I'll summarize because I know we have limited time, but I about 15 plus years ago, I worked in a horrible work environment. It was deeply toxic and just awful. Wrote about it in my first book, Making Work Work. It was really, really bad. And to make a long story short, very long story short, I ended up falling into a very deep depression as I tried to deal with these people and reach out to HR and do all that type of stuff, and was consistently ignored. And one morning, I live in Los Angeles. That's where I'm broadcasting from. And I was driving down the I-405 freeway here. And I was like, after dealing with so much cruelty and just deep seated meanness, for lack of a better way of putting it, I just fell into a deep depression. And I said while I was driving to work that morning to the toxic job, like, I'm done. I'm done. And unfortunately, as much as I wish I was saying I was done with the job, it was far darker than that. I made a decision while driving to this job that I was going to take my own life. And I did. I mean, I attempted, I should say. And when I did, I tried to swerve my car off the overpass in an attempt to make it look like an accident. Thankfully, the guardrail held, and I came back in incoming traffic. And I realized very shortly afterward, I was like, gosh, like, why isn't anyone doing something about the cruelty and meanness in professional settings? And, I talk with someone and they're like, hey, you're someone. Why don't you do something about it? And that was really kind of the beginning of it, because in the beginning, I was deeply unqualified. I wasn't the right person for this. I didn't know, never taught a class or spoke to anyone in front of an audience in my life. But I was driven by the idea that I knew that kindness meant something. I knew the suffering that happened with kindness was absent, but I also knew how great organizations operated and how there was a relief on mental health when kindness was present. It was a simple idea, and I just wanted to push it as far as I could, and here we are.
Man,
Wow, what a backstory.
yeah. Sometimes the most difficult challenges that humans have to face are you move beyond it because of just a willingness to do something. And so, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the fact that you were willing to tackle a probably seemingly impossible challenge to solve, and like you've made waves around the entire world by doing so. So, thank you for doing what you do. First of all,
Thank you, Austin. Appreciate that, man.
Yeah, and I think maybe I think I'm an optimist by nature. Like I try really hard to see the good in things, and sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't, and it bites me in the butt. And I think that there's a balance to be had between optimism and realism. But like, I just have such a hard time believing that people can be cruel, as you put it.
Oh my
And
God.
they are, obviously, in many instances. But like, why do you think that is? And why do you feel like it's been this it's okay that it's possible for a company culture to sort of go in such a dark direction, where it leads somebody like you to such a dark place and puts you in such an environment that you could even be there? Like, why does this happen?
That's the $1 million question, and there's so many ways to answer it. From my experience and my research, there's a couple of reasons why. I think in one case, you may run into people who just flat out are unaware of how their words and actions affect others. There's that, right? There's the part of, like, I was working with a client and a group that must go nameless, and the person was a supervisor over a team, and she was super toxic. At least that's what I was told. And I observed her working with her team, and she's raising her voice and yelling. And she said something that I found to be really telling. It's like, how would you know that I don't care about you if I wasn't yelling at you? That's how I'm showing you how I care. And it's like, not all the time you're going to get this, like, whoa, now we understand where this is coming
We understand
from.
what happened there.
Right? It's not always that simple, but it's like, it kind of was a wake-up call for me to understand. And I say this often, all bad behavior is simply an unskilled expression of an unmet need. And it's kind of deep if you think about this, right?
Can you say that again?
I will. Yeah, it's a tricky one. All bad behavior is an unskilled expression of an unmet need. So when you see people behaving poorly, oftentimes there's some need that's not being met. Now, oftentimes when you see people who are workplace bullies and treat people horribly, they're so broken inside and they feel so deeply insecure that this is their way of grasping towards some sort of meaning, some sort of stability, some sort of sense of control. Now, I'm not using this to excuse this behavior, obviously, but it kind of shows where this comes from. To the point, though, the question going deeper, I think a lot of the reasons why this happens is because it's allowed to happen. Seriously, it's like what we allow is what will continue. So when you see this bad behavior, but said person is bringing in big numbers to the organization and bringing in lots of numbers and money or whatever it may be, it's easy to turn a blind eye and be like, well, I know George is difficult to work with, but oh man, he's so good. His Q3 numbers, oh my gosh. We have to stop thinking like that and realize the cost, not just to the bottom line by having someone like that in a leadership position or just part of the team, but also the cost to humanity. We are allowing this behavior to continue unchecked. And I think that it's up to all of us to play a role trying to root this out before it's too late.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. I feel like we could just talk hours and hours about just
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Right? Like, can we stay here? Can we just keep this going? Right?
Why
Like,
not? Let's do it.
That would be just incredible. So I'm curious. So we've been talking like about kindness in this kind of larger organization, corporate setting. And as you know, you're a small business. Most of the listeners here are small micro businesses, often solopreneurs. How do you think like we can apply kindness as a business strategy distilled down into these smaller organizations? Do you have any like ideas there?
Heck yeah. It's one of the things that I think, especially if you're in a business where you are like me, the reason why I have, indoor plumbing and lights that are on is because I have to work with other people who will hopefully hire me. So kindness is not just a business strategy that you should think about, like in terms of keeping organizations running effectively, but for small businesses like myself and many people who are listening right now, need that. And I'll give you specifics. I think practicality helps. And one of the easiest things to do is, especially in the world of speaking, there's a couple of things. One of the kindest things you can do is anticipate needs, right? So if I'm flying in for a speech and I land in the city of the speech, most speakers most likely would be like, I made it here. I'm just going to go to my hotel room and go to bed. What if you just simply sent a text to the person who's organizing the event, said, hey, I'm here. I want to let you know everything worked out fine. Looking forward to tomorrow morning. It seems so simple, but like the meeting folks who I've had a chance to work with, like, God, I love that you do that. It just gives me peace of mind because I'm running around taking care of 1,000 things at once. And that's one big thing I don't have to worry about. So thank you. it's a gift of, it's a kindness that you can give to someone else. Another thing, these are so basic, but the funny thing is, because they're basic, that gives people a reason not to do it.
Yeah,
That's
for
it.
sure.
It's like,
Just to glaze over it, right?
The one of which is like the thank you. But the thank you is so interesting. It's like, always thank people after you have an opportunity to speak on their stage, and to reach out to them and share some things. They always enjoy that. They always appreciate it. They want to feel like what they're doing matters and that you had a good experience and that means something to them. There's so many things. And maybe the most important kind thing that by far is being easy to work with. There are, from what I've seen, a few divas in the speaking space who
Your words,
yeah,
not mine.
I own it. I'm owning it. That was unkind, perhaps, but it's true.
It's true,
dude,
yeah.
totally. And it's like, what I've seen, I'll give you an example, and I'm going to keep it super generic so it's not identifying. I'm going to make some real changes to the story so no one can figure out who this person is. But I was speaking at a conference, and there was a person who was speaking at the conference before me, and they were talking about compassion as their topic. And the AV was not working to this person's liking. And you could see this person getting really angry, like on stage. It's like, oh gosh, this isn't good. And then this person was about to share a story. The mic kind of was cutting in and out, and they got infuriated. Like, what are you guys doing? If you can't get a microphone to work correctly, then what are you doing here? Like, it's like, and mind you, this is from the stage, okay? It's from the stage.
On compassion as a topic.
Yo, that right? And then all of us, I mean, the jokes write themselves. And then after it was over, this episode was probably last like 7 seconds or so. The person gathered themselves and said, okay, let's go back to compassion. And it's like, what? There was such a lack of self-awareness from this person. And what I found in the audience was just not feeling them after that. But I mean, what was interesting is part of kindness too is also being the person who you said you are, right? If I'm going to market myself as a compassion speaker, in my case, a kindness speaker, or one on team cohesion, and I'm unable to demonstrate the basic tenets of my lesson in my day-to-day actions, not only is it unkind, but it's also untrustworthy, and it's hard for people to want to work with you again. So these are the things that, like, I teach my kids, but it's like, also, it's funny as adults how quickly we forget these lessons.
Yeah, it's true. Well, on one hand, like, looking at this person that you just gave the example of, right? Like, you can relate in some ways to the frustration that can come there, right? And so,
for sure,
in a lot of ways, like, kindness is sort of a discipline. Like, we have to be mindful and self-aware, and it's not always an easy thing to do, but it also isn't an excuse not to do it. I mean, you alluded to that earlier, and I also think that it's probably not as difficult as it seems, like, across the board, but like, we all have our issues where we slip up. And I think the important thing is that you're trying, right? Like, even that person, right? If they they would have composed themselves, and instead of going, okay, back to compassion, like, okay, guys, I'm sorry, I lost it there. That was not cool.
That would have done it.
My bad, right? Like that. People are very forgiving when we slip up, if we're just willing to own up to the mistake. But that's the difficult thing too.
And it's important to note, and I want to be super clear on this, like, I don't want to come off as like I'm this expert who's like kind every single second of the day. And like, I just this morning I was getting my youngest daughter's breakfast, and she was just standing in front of the fridge, like in my way. And I was just like, half awake. I was just like, move. And she's like, oh, daddy, aren't you like the kindness person? Isn't your nickname Brother Teresa? And I was like, yeah,
Brother Teresa.
That's my nickname. Yes, it's true.
Yes.
So they throw it at me all the time. Hey, Brother Teresa, you're telling me to move. I was like, oh man,
it's a high bar you've set for yourself,
dude.
Man.
I know. There's no going back, man. But it's so funny. I think the best way to word it is how you said it. It's a discipline. It's a practice, and it's something that requires ongoing attention. It's not like you can just roll out of bed and say, I'm going to be kind every single day. It's the world will test you. I'm like, let's see about that. And then you have to really lean into it. And it's not always as easy as it sounds.
Well, those are also the people that are most admirable, though, the ones that
Mhm.
face the biggest challenges and have the most reason to not be kind and yet still are.
That's a
So
great point.
those are the people to look up to. So I've got this question that's sort of been lingering in the back of my head, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. And you actually made this distinction earlier between being kind and being nice, which was
Yeah.
fascinating. I've never picked those two things apart for myself, but I think you can go too extreme with anything, right?
Yep.
And maybe kindness isn't the right word. Maybe this is niceness that I'm talking about here. But I imagine if somebody is so focused on being kind that they lose themselves in that you can sort of get trampled on. You can stop being heard. You can stop being willing to confront issues when you need to. So where's the line for you between being kind and still being sovereign? Maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, but
No,
being
I
your own
follow.
person, being willing to stand
Yeah.
up for yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 1000%. And I think that's where that distinction between nice and kind comes in, because kindness understands that it's a deep level of demonstrating that you care about others. And I should have included this before, and also should demonstrate that we care about ourselves as well. So, like, when a good example of this, a lot of stuff happened so recently. I had an opportunity to be in a board meeting for an organization, and I was sitting in there, and this happens, unfortunately, to a lot of women. The woman shared, it was a large, mostly male group in this boardroom, but there's about maybe 20% were women. And this woman shared a point, and it got glossed over, not surprisingly. And then a gentleman in the meeting, maybe 5 minutes later, regurgitated
Same
what
idea.
she had said, maybe switch a couple of words around, like, whoa, George, that was just brilliant. And what I saw with the demonstration of kindness was from another gentleman in the boardroom who was like, oh, hold on a second. I'm changing names. You know, that's interesting. Amy literally just said that 5 minutes ago. So I don't know. I'm not sure if you all caught that, but she literally said, and then he repeated it. So, like, we should probably be starting with Amy, because that's really what Amy said. That was Amy's idea. That's an example of kindness. The easy thing to do would be like, or the nice thing. I don't want to make any waves. Maybe Amy didn't say it. I don't know. So the line is when you're talking about your own self-respect, when you're talking about how you're being treated, um, and how you're treating others, that's my thing. That's kind of my litmus test. Like, am I hurting myself by engaging in this behavior, by allowing something to continue? As a Black man, I have to deal with a lot that, quite frankly, I would prefer not to deal with. And part of the challenge for me is that I have to make decisions almost on a near daily basis. Do I engage in this conversation? Does a person know what they're saying is actually really offensive to me? Some of these examples are really basic, but I'll just give you one. Oftentimes when I speak, people, depending on where you are in the country, come up to me and like, wow, oh my gosh, you speak so well. I was blown away. Oh my, when you started talking, I was like, oh, heavens to Betsy. I had no idea what was going to come out of your mouth, but you're educated.
Oh,
And it's like,
Oh no.
good Lord.
Ouch.
So it's that stuff. So, like, part of it is the nice thing to do, if you want to even call it that. It's like, thank you. I try. But the kind thing is to help someone maybe understand, like, that's not cool. You're expecting me to be an idiot for some reason. And I'm really struggling as to why you would think that. So a very easy way to be kind in those situations is that, and this happened relatively recently, that's why it's kind of fresh in my mind, is after the person said that to me, I just simply asked a question like, she's, oh my gosh, like, wow, you speak so, wow, you're so educated. And I was like, oh, help me out. What do you mean by that? What do you, no, I'm just super curious. Like, I mean, you said like you're surprised, right? So that I speak so well. I speak for a living, right? So I should be kind of good at this, I would suppose. What did you mean by that? And it's a way to help someone understand what they said wasn't cool, right? So to the point, really directly, that line is around really thinking about treating yourself like someone who you love. And it's like, if that were my kids, I would want my kids to stand up for themselves. I have to stand up for myself. It's a kind thing to do, to honor yourself. And that goes back to the practice part, because there's a lot of people who are either unwilling or unable. I actually go more to unwilling, because everyone's able to do it, to really stand up for themselves and honor themselves when someone is being unkind to them. And it's not always easy to be that person to honor yourself, but once you start doing it, it is hard to stop.
Yeah. Well, I feel like even when we first started the conversation where you separated nice and kind, I feel like that's even just been more solidified in this portion of our conversation. And the thing that I'm kind of sensing about being kind, as I'm learning from you, Shola, is that there's often this like element of inclusivity about being kind. You're thinking about your children, for example. You're thinking about bettering humanity by being kind, and like asking that question to that woman when obviously things got a little offensive. And there are a million ways to take that interaction and be defensive, or maybe just pass it off, or whatever
Sure.
it was. But it sounds like being kind has this element of inclusivity to it. And I'm assuming that's probably why your framework go together kind of ties into some things. Am I picking up on those two connections? Am I bridging that gap properly?
Man, Taylor, my marketing is working. So yeah, that's exactly.
All right,
yeah. Oh man, yes. There's a huge idea of inclusivity in this. I think the worst way to live life is to be the type of person who's like, hey, if it's not a problem for me, then it's not a problem. It's like, and I think it hurts so many folks, because there's so many people who are struggling in some way. And, the idea of going together is based on an African proverb that's my all-time favorite. It's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I believe this is the way that we can really start bringing ourselves out of pain. What I wish more people realized is that, like, I know allyship is a word that's thrown out often, but like the idea of more men standing up for women, more straight people standing up for the LGBTQ plus community, more white people standing up for people of color. There's an opportunity there to come together and to really do some amazing things when we start to see, like, wow, we do have differences, and it's important that we see those, but we also understand that this, at baseline, the things that unite us, wanting safety, kindness, being treated with respect, having an opportunity to live a life where we get to self-actualize in some way, those are all things that we all experience. And the sooner we come to realize that, the better. But last month, I don't know when this will air, but back in September 2021, I was invited to speak at Capitol Hill to testify in front of Congress, to give advice on how to make Congress more civil to one another. And that was a trip. But I'll tell you, one of the things that I found in a whole 2 hours of testimony, one of the cool things that I mentioned, I think that really resonated, was in order for people to really get to a place where either side of the aisle has a chance to come together, you're going to have to start humanizing people. And there's a real market in dehumanization. Like, the other side is this and the other side is that. And we see it in Congress, we see it in our schools, we see it in sometimes our neighborhoods. And I think in order for us to go together, it has to start with kindness. And that's what I'm hoping to drive home.
Man, that, our culture, our society is so focused on the idea of being right and wrong about things that
Yeah.
I think, like, we do remove the humanity from the equation. And, like, I don't know, everything in life has gray area, like, in most ways. Like, you could probably argue with that statement, but anyways, my point is like, that everybody has their opinions, and they're valid opinions, and we just have to be able to unpack them. And that doesn't mean that we need to stick to those opinions. Our opinions should evolve, but that's the whole point. Like, we have to have the conversation in order for us to make any progress and to land in anything that makes everybody happy, or happier, I guess, than where we were when we started. And so, first of all, kudos to you. I hope that we make some progress in that area, because I would love it if I could turn on the news and it was like, Congress sat down today and had a wonderful we made real progress. Like, that's not happening most of the time right now.
I mean, one of these days. But I mean, I think part of it is just like you said, Austin, we got to, like, start the conversation at least. We got to begin to at least sit
Raise the
down and
awareness,
try
right?
to find that common ground in some way.
Yeah, man, what a valuable episode, Shola. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about kindness. Like I feel like this is one of those subjects where it can be easy to brush off. And that's not to be dismissive of the concept, but it's like, oh, I can be kind. You can immediately say, we assume rather, I know what kindness is and I'm kind. And then we look away and go do the other thing. And I feel like I learned so much in just this half-hour conversation about
Oh,
the
wow.
areas that I'm excelling in and the areas I'm not excelling in, and really the differences between what being nice and kind is. Like, there's just so much more depth to this topic than I think I even understood. So hopefully that's the same for all of our listeners. Thank you so much for providing value. Austin, I know you're
Yeah, I have to bring this up. So look, I was telling Taylor about this. Like, I think I've watched your demo video, Shola,
Yeah.
so many
Oh,
times.
man.
Many times.
Oh.
I'm not even my wife, we've watched it together. I cry every time I watch
Oh,
it.
geez, man.
Real
That's
true story. True story.
wow, man. Appreciate that. Wow.
Yeah. But you have this phrase in there, Ubuntu. Am I saying that
Ubuntu.
right?
Yeah,
Ubuntu.
it's a tricky one. Ubuntu. Yes, for sure.
I just think it's so cool. Can you share that with our audience?
Yeah, I'll keep it tight. Ubuntu is an African word that means I am because we are. There's not a real English one-to-one equivalent with this word. So the best way to describe it is Ubuntu is the height of human kindness, human compassion, and human connectedness. And I decided to go on a journey to try to see how to operationalize that in the world of business. And that was my second book, Go Together, based on the concept of Ubuntu and how we can put that to work in our workplaces.
Oh man, well, I love that. It's such a easy thing to remember too. I love anything like when you can label the abstract. It makes it more practical,
Mhm.
right? So
100%, 100%. That word is it, Ubuntu. It's a beautiful word.
yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. Shola, you are incredible. Thank you again for taking the precious time to come and be on the show with us. As you know, since you're already here, we're all about creating value for our audience. So what are some of the things right now you're working on that our listeners can benefit from?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're into the message and you feel like this is something that could change how you work, live, and lead, bring real practicality to this stuff, my books, I have 2 books. Making Work Work is my first one that was a bestseller. And then my most recent book is Go Together, which is I just kind of talked about that spirit of Ubuntu. And I am working behind the scenes on creating a actual course and certification in Making Work Work, because a lot of people want the real practicality to bring civility into workplaces. So that should be coming in early 2022. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, feel free to grab a book and to dive into the content more freely.
Awesome. Well, hey, links will be in the description. So everybody go check those out. Definitely get a book. And of course, leave a review because obviously.
Yes.
And hey, if you like this episode, don't forget to rate it, like it, subscribe to it. And if you want more awesome resources like this, go to speakerflow.com/resources. Thank you so much for chiming in. I just wanted to take a second to thank our sponsor, Auxbus. Auxbus is the all-in-one suite of tools you need to run your podcast. And it's actually what we run here at Speakerflow for Technically Speaking. It makes planning podcasts simple. It makes recording podcasts simple. It even makes publishing podcasts to the masses simple. And quite honestly, Technically Speaking wouldn't be up as soon as it is without Auxbus. Thank you so much, Auxbus. And if you are interested in checking Auxbus out, whether you're starting a podcast or you have one currently, get our special offer, auxbus.com/speakerflow, or click the link below in our show notes.
Thanks for tuning in today. Check the show notes for more info and see you next time. Later.